Hey, what's going on everybody, man? Welcome back to Art Geeks. This is episode 2, and in this video I'm gonna be showing you how I created this painting right here, and I'm gonna show you the full process. And actually, I really love how this piece turned out, and I feel like that's a little bit weird to say as an artist, because I feel like you're supposed to not really like your work that much, so it feels a little weird when you say that you actually like it. But anyway, I just wanted to say big thanks for all of the support on episode 1. You guys wrote 47 comments, and there's some amazing questions, and I'm gonna be doing a Q&A in this video, so I'm gonna be answering all these questions while also talking about the process. So if you have any other questions, just make sure you comment below and I'll answer in the future. So I believe I showed you the sketch of this painting last time. I found this reference right here on the left that I was super inspired by on Pinterest, and I believe it was actually even like a video, and you just see how I screenshotted it. You can even see like the little seconds and the little play button in the middle, and I feel like I'm kind of going through this fisheye lens sort of a period where I'm just super inspired by fisheye lens references. And I wasn't really confident whether I'd be able to actually draw this, but I just kind of started out as like a quick sketch, and I was like, all right, I really like this pose. Let me see kind of how I can draw it and whether I'm even gonna like it as a drawing. And thankfully this time I keep all of the layers, so I'm gonna be able to really show you my full process in all the layers. So this is the initial sketch that I did, and I believe it took me somewhere around 5 minutes, and I really hate to actually flex with fucking time because I really feel like it doesn't matter. But when I do sketches like this, I really don't know whether I'm even gonna like it and whether I'm gonna take it further, so that's why I kind of just like to sketch it out and see whether it's even worth going into it. And last time people had some questions about fisheye lens perspective, and I just wanted to show you what I'm thinking about when I'm really drawing this. So the way I really think about it is really just as these boxes that are just turning in space. So I'm really thinking about which parts of the torso I'm seeing and how her pelvis is really looking in the back. And for the legs and the arms, I really like to just think about cylinders. So it's really this wrapping of the cylinders that kind of helps me to actually think about this in 3D space. And even though I'm actually not drawing this, this is literally what's happening in my head. So I kind of liked how the sketch ended up looking, but I just felt like it was very empty and there was literally no background. So I was really looking for a reference that I would be able to kind of sort of steal the whole background. And I have this folder where I save just different fisheye lens references that I'm really fond of. And obviously the background needs to be fisheye lens as well in order for it to match. So this is when I actually pulled up this reference, and I really liked all the colors and the fact that she was in this weird like hospital, or like what the fuck is this? Where is she at? And I was really intrigued by it. I was like, oh, hold up. Can I make this figure actually be in this background? Like, can that actually work? So this is kind of how I just started sketching out the background from these purple references and just trying to copy exactly what I was seeing in the reference. But I feel like it was a pretty lucky pick because it matched really well with the other reference. And I feel like that's a pretty common question, is how do you know whether this reference is going to work or not? And I really don't. I'm only guessing that it will look good, but I really have to sketch it out and see kind of how it looks. But what I'm always thinking about is it really matching the same sort of perspective, and is it really matching the same sort of angle? And I feel like it kind of worked, so now I just proceed to do these very quick sort of rough colors filling in just to see how the colors would be looking. So this is just kind of like a rough color thumbnail to see what colors am I even gonna be using. So I'm not really even precise. I'm just kind of figuring out all of the black, and then I'm just picking this sort of pinkish color for her skin. So I'm not really doing any shading. I'm just kind of doing everything with one color, and I'm seeing whether I even like the vibe of the whole painting. And I really do the same thing with the background. So I just start laying out some darker shapes to see how the background is really going to feel. And at this point, I'm really just thinking about sort of the composition and what shapes am I really gonna have in the background and the values that are gonna be there. So what is gonna be dark and what is gonna be light. And I was really intrigued to be able to replicate this sort of checkers board, but my dumb ass, instead of just grabbing an image of a checkboard, try to paint it. So you see me in the video just trying to paint these little squares and trying to position them on the ground. Definitely not worth the try, and actually later you see me pulling up an image and just using the ready image, and I'll show you that later. So this is is kind of how the rough color thumbnail ended up looking. And you really see that there's no shading. She doesn't even have any lips or nose. It was purely about whether this piece is gonna be really worth spending the time. So I'm really just squinting a lot, and I'm thinking about the color palette. Like, what colors am I really gonna be using in this piece? And this is usually the stage where I'll drop a lot of paintings. And this actually just ended up being one of the lucky sketches, and I just decided to ended up refining the sketch and taking it to the next stage. But I feel like it might be very misguiding because there's so many sketches that every professional artist is doing that the audience is not seeing, and people just think that every sketch that they do and every painting that they do is just absolutely amazing. But you really just get to see all the lucky ones that the artist has decided to really get to the next level, and there's so many others that he was just completely like, nah, not in a million years. So basically at this stage, you just kind of see me fading away the lines and really starting to refine each part of the portrait and really starting to think more about the design. So I basically have all of the figure laid out, and I'm really just trying to think deeper about the design. So I'm spending a lot of time, and I mean a lot of time, just working on individual lines and thinking about, does this angle actually match the angle that I'm seeing in the reference? So I'm doing a lot of small adjustments, and I'm using a lot of the transform tool. And this is actually where we're gonna answer our first question. So Lumen X7499 says, love the new breakdown content, thank you for the videos. No, thank you. I would really be interested in seeing some more hacks you can use, like the perspective hack, just seeing little shortcuts that your program provides, because I don't know what to do with most of the tools that I have. So yeah, I'm actually using Photoshop, and a tool that I'm constantly using for this painting is I would just select an area, and then I'll go to the transform tool with Control T, and then when you press right click, you have this thing in here called distort. And now with distort, when you actually press these corners, you're really pushing the perspective of the thing you have selected. So see, that's how I'm really pushing the perspective of the whole figure. Or you can just press Control on the transform tool and really just push all these corners and kind of fuck around with the perspective, but I really just use that as sort of a small adjustment. So when I was doing the sketch, you saw me that I'm not really using these tools, and I'm just using more of these tools when I'm really refining the drawing. I feel like a pretty common misconception is that you're using these tools to create a drawing when you're just using these tools to refine a drawing. If you're not really capable of kind of figuring out the perspective without any tool, I would kind of recommend you to just be able to draw a simpler reference, because even if you have the best tool, if you don't understand what you're doing, it'll just look wrong. The next question we have is from Marietta8086. I always see these drawings with cool perspectives, and I wanted to learn how. I started studying 1.2.3.4.5. Let's get it. Realizing how much I've been behind before studying this shit. Baby, listen, we're all behind, all right? This is part of being an artist. I still don't completely know how to do it since I studied from different YouTubers and Google, pure image. Bro, Google is really your best teacher though. So I would love it if you do a video about perspective. Still, I'm okay with anything you do since you already taught me a lot. Please don't pressure yourself, and that's just an idea. Oh, you're just too nice with me. I appreciate that, but I'm here to help. All right, so I can really do like a deeper perspective tutorial in the future, but honestly, I feel like people just get so overwhelmed by just watching all these complex perspective tutorials, and they just don't know how to really apply that to their art. Okay, like cool, you understand a vanishing point and whatever the fuck, but how do you apply that to a cool looking art? So this is why I would really recommend you this exercise right here, where you're able to start tracing the perspective on top of references. And this thing right here is actually from our figure course in Doodle Warriors Academy. Shameless plug. But really the first lesson in our figure course is being able to trace these cubes and cylinders that you're seeing on top of references. So it's literally this thing that I'm thinking about while working on my own painting. So although perspective videos can be very useful, I think the most important thing, and that helped me, is just being able to trace on top of references these different boxes and cylinders. And if you're actually interested in that, there's multiple videos that are about 40 minutes each in our figure course, and you can join that by joining our Doodle Warriors Academy, and there will be a link below this video. But I would also love to talk more about this in future episodes, so any questions you have, definitely ask me in the comments and I'll be answering them in the future. All right, back to the painting and some questions. Arigato honey pie. I think maybe explaining what makes a good reference versus a bad reference would be good. I like how you ask that as if it's like the most simple question ever. Like, man, can you just tell me how to spell the word red? Like, the art of understanding what's a good reference versus a bad reference is like such a subtle thing that I feel like it's a skill that keeps developing as you get better yourself, but I can definitely rant about it. So the most important thing about references is to understand that there is not just good and bad references. Oh wow, look at Angel being so accepting. There's no black and white, everybody's good. What I mean is that there's just different references for different things. So when I'm really drawing and I'm picking a reference, I try to really think about why am I picking this reference and what do I like about it. So I feel like the biggest thing to keep in mind is what is your skill level? Because if you select references that are way too advanced for you, like for example, you can't really break down the perspective of a figure, but you pick a fisheye lens, you won't even be able to kind of like exploit the full potential of that reference because you don't even understand like what's happening on the reference. So I feel like that's the challenge of picking a reference, is that oftentimes people are not even aware of where their current skill level is at and what they're trying to study and what they're trying to improve. For example, if you're trying to just find a reference for better colors, but you're really just struggling with your shading and with your lines, you might be thinking, man, my color sucks, but it's actually not the color, it's just all these other things that come before the color. So what I think makes references good or bad really depends on the artist who's using them. For example, I feel like some references might be amazing for one artist who's trying to learn this thing and they're at this skill level, but it might be very conflicting and it might bring a lot of frustration to another artist who doesn't really have that skill level. For example, if you gave me these two references just a couple of years ago, I would not be able to use them and I won't really know what to do with them because I won't really have any experience with fisheye lens and I won't even be able to pull off all these pink neon colors. So I really want to answer your question, but it's very subjective, and I would say what makes a good references good for you is if they match what you're trying to learn at the time. Next question, strange sentient being. This is so amazing, it really inspires me to keep trying and getting better. I'm glad to hear that shit. I do have a question though. Do you have any tips for not spending too much time on a piece, especially if it doesn't fit the image you had? That's a great question. So what I normally do is I just have these different stages of a painting that I'm always trying to reach, and when I reach that stage, I ask myself, is it even worth going to the next stage with this piece? So as I showed you before, the first stage is really this rough sketch, and after doing this rough sketch, I'm thinking about, does this have potential? Should I really try this out with some colors? And if I have the proper references and I have some ideas for colors, I try that out and I see how it looks. But after I try out the colors, if it feels like this is just not a good fit, I don't really keep going with it. And then in the next stage, I really just refine all the lines and I make the finished sort of a sketch. And this is sort of the last stage that I kind of allow myself to quit, because if I feel like I like the sketch and I like the colors, this piece is just like worth finishing. So I would really just give it my best and try to apply these colors to this sketch that I like, because I know I like both of them. And I feel like if something is not working out, it's very useful for me to ask those questions. Why is this not working out? Where is the problem coming from? Is it the shading? Is it really something in like the details? Like, what am I not liking about this? So if I haven't quit the painting until these 3 different stages, I usually just try to finish it and tell myself, all right, this is the best that I can do. Let me just move on to the next. So yeah, I don't know if this was really helpful in your situation, but do let me know what you think. So after deciding to go forward with the sketch, I really start creating masks for the different things that I'm gonna be painting. So this is where I'm really starting to be super clear, and I'm just making like a whole layer for the figure, and I'm making the different layers for the background. So I'm refining the whole silhouette because I want it to be very clear, because if it's not, I feel like I won't really be able to tell where the mistake is coming from. So from this point forward, I'm trying to be extra clean with everything that I'm doing, because I now know that I'm gonna try to really finish this painting. So now I'm really just filling out with a flat color all of these different parts of the painting, like the clothes, the glasses. And what I'm really doing is I'm laying out what's called the local color of each part part of the painting. And I see that as a pretty common question that people ask, like, how do you pick the colors? How do you know what color to pick? User QTAWL something something. The colors, how do you find the right colors? For the highlight stuff, for example, you don't take the same colors as the reference. How do you determine which color is best? All right, so how do you pick colors? I know this sounds like a great question to ask, as if it has like a specific answer, but that question really sounds like, well, how do you make a good painting? So the only way to be able to pick good colors is to understand how colors really work. So if you look at what we teach in our portrait course, portrait system, we teach you really how to build up the colors slowly. I feel like it's a pretty common misconception for people to think, oh, like you just need to pick the exact colors from the beginning. But actually, you need to build up the colors one at a time. So this is why we teach people how to first find what the local color of a subject is, and then to really build up all the shadows using a slightly different color. So not immediately getting super dark, but really building it up from first, second, third. And only after you really have all the shadows, you actually get to build up all the other light sources and actually think about light. So really the question of picking colors really depends on what painting you're working on, but it really has to do with you understanding how you're gonna build up the colors of this specific painting. And what's crazy is that you can't really just kind of color pick the colors of the reference and use that. Because if you really look at this reference in here, for example, with this cool color lighting, it kind of feels like it has this warm sort of like color in the middle where it feels kind of orangish and yellow. But if you select this exact color from here with the color picker, it just looks like completely gray. So you just kind of color picking the reference and using those colors is really just gonna lead to like weird ass colors. Instead, you need to be able to really analyze the different colors and understand what color do I need to start with, how do I build up the shadows, and then how do I get to that final color. So if in the final painting it looks green, you can't really just get to the green. You have to build it up and go through some of the orange first and then really build the green on top of the orange. So what I'm trying to explain to you here, we cover in depth in our portrait course, so it kind of takes a few hours to understand this. So I'm not sure exactly what your skill level is, so ask me questions down below of what you don't understand so I can talk more about it in the future. All right, back to the painting. This is where I started painting the checkboard. So I literally just googled checkboards and I grabbed one of the images and I kind of duplicated it multiple times until it became very small, and then I selected all the white and I kind of removed it so only the black can stay. And now that I kind of hit this pattern, I started making it bigger and using the transform tool that I showed you with perspective and really aligning sort of the perspective of the pattern to really make it match the reference as closely as I could. And people actually asked me for the full process of the painting, so I literally just posted that as an unlisted video and you can check out the link below. So if you want to watch me live struggle with this perspective and try to like play around with the tools for like a whole hour without any music, definitely just check the whole real-time example below. There's also this really cool thing in Liquify that allows you to just kind of play around with the proportions and just kind of distort stuff, so I've been using kind of that as well. As you see, great results. I was also thinking about like adding some pattern in the background for like the walls and stuff, and I pretty much just played around this for like 30 minutes or something, and at the end it just felt very overwhelming and it was like taking a lot of the painting, so I just completely removed it and just kind of left the doors in the background just more simple. So for the rest of the background, I really wanted to just keep it simple, so I just kind of had this orange sort of shapes and these blue shapes that kind of represent shadows while the orange represented light. And you see I'm still not really adding a lot of colors. I'm really just adding a few colors and making them flat just so I can see whether it actually works before going on to build up all the shadows and all of the lights afterwards. And then from there, I really start shading the figure. So I really just go to each part of the painting and I add the lights and the shadows, for example, the clothes, the face. And J Moon Dart actually asked, do you use layer mode like multiply or overlay when shading? No. I know a lot of artists use like multiply, layer and all this for shading, but I feel like it's very limiting because I really like to just hand pick the colors myself and paint on normal layers, so I know the color that I'm picking is the color that I'm getting. shading. I feel like if you rely on layer modes, you're not really just kind of understanding what color is really gonna come out of that, and that can kind of lead to some quick results, but it won't really be you understanding exactly what you're going for. So I don't use them, and I'm not a huge fan of using layer modes for shading. I like them as something to boost your colors afterwards as effects, but not really as a shading technique. So this is how my layers are looking at the shading, and I want to show you some of them so you can understand what I'm thinking about when shading. So for example, in the face, I really have first shadow, second shadow, I have the light of the face, and then I really have this rim light that's coming from the side. So I really like to just use one color per layer and just use this color as much as possible and develop the whole values of the painting. So I'm constantly looking at my painting in black and white and seeing whether it actually looks 3D and whether the shading makes it look more three-dimensional. So literally the whole skin is just painted with 4 different colors and 4 different layers. 2 shadows, 1 rim light, and 1 normal light. And then after this basic shading, I would really develop it further in the rendering. If you look at the hair, for example, it only has this lights layer and this shadow layer. So what I'm concerned with is really figuring out these exact shapes, so the shapes can look good and the colors can be the exact colors that I'm looking for. And then afterwards in the rendering, you see kind of how I develop it further, but I'm always starting out with these basic shapes and adding more depth in the actual rendering. For the glasses, for example, I just have this one layer with like blue light, one layer with this orange light, one layer for the actual highlights, and another layer for the highlights that are on the rims of the glasses. So that's literally just 4 colors and 4 different layers, and I have full control over the shapes and the edges that I'm using. And I like to just keep everything on separate layers so I can kind of really have full control over it and manipulate the edges, clean them up, and really get the shapes that I'm looking for. So this process kind of goes for a little while I'm just kind of going around different parts of the painting and really refining these shapes. Again, you can just check the full process in the video of how I really create them, and I'm just trying out different things. I'm trying out adding the orange of the glasses on the left, I'm trying out the orange on the right, and seeing what type of color, shapes, and edges do I really need to make in order to make this look the best possible painting that I can. So let's just take a look at some questions while this kind of goes in the background and you watch me just kind of shade different things. A Goose Life D says, "Hi Angel, glad to see you again." Hey, glad to see you too, although I've never really seen you. Bro, I love your videos. You can't understand how much I can learn from this shit. My mans. Seeing you explain what difficulties you had and all the process is a really good way to process the information you give. Thank you. God damn, all the compliments. You might as well just become a student and sign up for the academy. I like the comments about colors, but personally I keep struggling with basic things. Line quality, for example. Also the rendering part. I really want you to talk in deeper about that. I just see how in Flash from a basic drawing to a really good painting. Those chains are sick. Well, thank you, Goose Life D6010. So it's really good that you recognize that your struggles are not really coming from the colors and they're coming from the line quality and the rendering. What my biggest recommendation would be is for you to just do only sketches in the beginning and then move on to actually just doing black and white paintings. That way you can really just practice shading and rendering without overwhelming yourself by color. Because there's so many different choices that I'm making when picking all these colors and I'm building up all these colors that it can really overwhelm you on top of all of the decisions about shading. This is why in our courses we always show you just starting with the sketch first and developing your line quality, and then understanding how to shade in black and white, understanding how first shadow, second shadow, third shadow, and understanding how to render before you really move on to color and you combine all of this knowledge together. I also have some YouTube videos about how to improve your lines on my YouTube channel, but really the biggest thing is to be able to find exercises that would help you to really improve these things that you're struggling with. Angie Krasiva says, "Angel, you're one of the top artists which works inspired me and which style I wanted to pursue starting from 2018. Oh man, I'm glad. Shit, you've been painting for 5 years. That's something. I'm glad to see you back to art and thank you for starting this series. Well, you're welcome. Thank you for showing up. Since I started to work at office, I have less time to do art and I'm pretty slowly progressing since sketch to full rendered work. Do you have some tips when it comes to make the process of painting faster? I'll look forward to the next episode. By the way, this painting is amazingly powerful. Greetings from Serbia. Oh shit, a fellow Eastern European. Well, thank you, Angie. I do have some tips about how to paint faster. Okay, and listen closely. You don't try to paint faster. I think one of the biggest misconceptions that people have is that in order to improve, you have to create completed rendered pieces. Otherwise, you're not really improving. So let's talk about this for a minute. What makes you really improve at art? What really improves you at art is just putting time in what you're trying to really learn and practicing that. So if you're spending, let's say, 3 hours on you improving your lines, and you know that you're doing like exercises and you know what you need to improve, that's gonna give you even more improvement than you working 3 hours on finishing a piece and you're just rushing it and you don't even know exactly what you're trying to accomplish. So this is why I never really look at time. I don't care how long it takes me to really complete my paintings. And I feel like in this day and age with social media, you just hear all these artists, man, I just did this in 1 hour. Didn't I do this in the beginning of the video where I told you it took me fucking 5 minutes? See, it's our fucking fault. But in all honesty, I feel like if your goal is to paint faster, you're kind of pursuing a little bit the wrong thing. Because really your speed kind of comes out as a result of you understanding what you need to improve and what decisions you're making while you're doing the painting. So when a professional is drawing, they're not really doing a painting in 1 hour because they're painting really fast. They're making it in 1 hour because they've done thousands of paintings and they know exactly what they need to execute and exactly where their mistake is. So I don't know if you've heard this quote, but it's literally go slow in order to go fast. So really it's in your ability to actually take your time to study things in depth and understand how they work that makes you faster in the future, because literally your brain is getting all the knowledge. So I'm sorry if I didn't really give you any tips, but really my tip would be focus on the amount of hours you're practicing rather than thinking about, well, I'm spending way too much time on this and I really need to complete my piece. So it's not about you just kind of completing your piece. It doesn't matter how much time it takes. And focusing on time, I feel like that would just kind of lead to a lot of confusion and frustration afterward. Does this fucking help though? Like let me know, like talk to me in the comments, Angie. Like let me know what you think. Other people, like let me know what you think. I want to read your comments. I want this shit to be back and forth. Okay. All right. Next we have Michael Ofionani. I don't know if that's how it's pronounced. I'm intrigued by your process and execution. Your skill in bringing out the details is extraordinary. Oh, thanks, Michael. I find myself wondering, how would one incorporate this unique style into real commission work, especially when dealing with challenging references images? Do you have any advice or insights on how to tackle such situations and maintain the artistic essence you've beautifully demonstrated in this painting? Bro, that sounds like a really sophisticated words and question. Your expertise would be invaluable. God damn it, you know this dude is way smarter than I am. Right, so that's a real struggle that I always have when doing commissions, is that people would just kind of send you some shitty fucking references. And honestly, I feel like the best you can do is look for the best reference. So I always ask for multiple references. And I'm also always looking for other references about the colors, about the lighting, about the shading. So I feel like people are mainly worried about their likeness in a commission and they don't really have that much of an idea of exactly about what colors or lighting they need to have. So I feel like when doing commissions, I just find references that I like to use about the colors and the lighting and everything else, so I can really feed my artistic sort of desires. But honestly, I feel like one of the most important things to understand is that commissions are work. So you can't really have the same feeling as you do with your own personal work. So that's why I always like to just kind of keep my personal work from my freelance work and understand that one is work and the other is complete creative control that I have as an artist. Because when you're really doing work, you're trying to please a client. So sometimes if the client tells you like this needs to be blue or this needs to be green, you have to make it because they want it. So I know that can be frustrating, and that's why I think it's so important to keep doing personal art and understand that there's always gonna be a difference between the two. All right, so far into the painting, I've kind of gone around the whole painting and I've just kind of laid out all of the colors and all of the shading. For something like the background, it might feel like it's complex, but it's really just the same things that I do for the face. So there's really just the lights with one color, and there's like shadows that are kind of creating some deeper depth of the darkness, and there's also layers that are just creating gradients in the actual lights. And this stage is what I call the color block-in, because you've really just shaded everything, you've added all the shadows and the lights, and you can really move on to rendering. So this is how the painting kind of changes from the blocking to rendering. And in some paintings, the rendering can really change the blocking and improve it a lot, and in others that are already clean, the rendering won't really make that much of a difference. But it's really just about refining some of the edges, blending more the colors, and I would honestly just love to do some more in-depth videos about rendering. So please let me know again in the comments what questions you would have. So at this point, I've really just merged all the layers, and I'm just kind of going around all the painting, and I'm really refining it with a smaller brush and just kind of working on those smallest details. Bethman1300 asks, do you ever use any additional effects, overlays, color dodge, curves, hues, just anything to edit the colors after you finish the painting, just to make them pop, or do you leave it as you've painted it? And things such as noise or chromatic aberration too, would love to see you talk about that, just those small little finishing touches to make your art even juicier. Thanks for the vids, love you Angel, love you too baby. Right, so I actually do some color edits after I'm finished with the painting, and this is kind of how it looks before and after editing. And the way that I do it is I actually use this filter called Camera Raw. So under the filter menu, and I go in here and I start playing around with the sliders and pushing some things like the shadows, the whites, the blacks. And I really love this menu in here called calibration. So I always just play around with the sliders, and I'm just kind of moving them, and I'm really seeing how can I shift more of the colors and make them even more trippy than they already are. But again, I really like to just use this as more of a finishing touch, and I really make sure that I get good colors from the start with normal layers so I can have more control, because if your colors are kind of weird from the start, you editing them is not really gonna help that much. And sometimes I like to just kind of push the editing even more, just to kind of go too much, and then I'll just kind of lower the opacity, and it will just kind of normalize it with things that are below it. As far as noise, what I do is I just select like a warm color. I go to filter, noise, add noise, then add 100% of the noise, change the layer mode to lighten, then open up hue and saturation and start really darkening the layer so the noise would only affect like the shadows. And I'm really fond of this effect because it only shows in the shadows, because I feel like if it's in the whole painting, it becomes a little too overwhelming. And the other trick that I use is called chromatic aberration that you already mentioned. So I double click the layer, turn off the green and the blue channel, and then I just make the whole image bigger, so that kind of just creates this trippy chromatic aberration. But you got to be careful, you don't want to do it too much. So I do it just enough so it kind of has these trippy colors on the edges of the painting. And then I just add my simple signature on a linear dodge. Please don't fucking do any watermarks, I swear. And sometimes I like to just use some subs, so I would just write some text with Arial and just make it yellow. Nothing really that fancy. And with that, we have a finished painting. And final question that we have is from Svetlana. Hi Angel, amazing podcast. It was interesting to see your process and hear your thoughts. Thank you. Do let me know about this one. Chain's struggles are funny, but you've won. The art is great. Thanks. Could you please share the artists that you get inspiration from? How do people even find them, or is it a matter of chance? Thank you. So last time I showed you this board in this application called Miro, where I save just artists that I like, and there's all these different images that I'm in love with and the artist on top. And really the way I find those is either through Instagram or Pinterest. So there's not really any very complicated process. I just go in my Instagram feed or Pinterest feed and just start looking at some cool art, and I start really looking at who painted it. And once I find the artist, I really try to find their Instagram, and I try to just save as many images I kind of like. So yeah, I guess you can kind of just call it chance, because it's whatever kind of comes up on my social media. And some people actually asked for a link to this board, so I'm just gonna post the link down below so you can just enter in here for free and check out all these artists that I'm really inspired by. So definitely check all of them out. So this is it for this episode. out. I don't know if this was too long. Again, do let me know what you want me to talk about or you want me to change in the future. And if you're interested in learning more together, definitely check out the Doodle Warriors Academy. We have multiple courses and there's gonna be linked down below so you can check it out and join it. Thank you so much. You have a nice day or whatever, and I'm gonna see you next time.